Ahoy, and welcome back to Leia's Library. Find yourself a cozy corner, get yourself something nice and cozy to drink, and let's get started. Today we are going to be going over all of the books that I read in December of 2022. This video is coming out a little bit late, but oh well. Let's get into it. So, the first book that I read, or rather finished, in December was The Golden Enclaves by Naomi Novik, which is a YA dark academia fantasy. It is the final book in the Scholomance trilogy. Oh wow, it's so cold in my apartment, but this tea is so nice and warm. Oh, yes. Anyway, so yeah, I am delighted to report that I still really enjoy this series. Which is always kind of up in the air until the final book comes out. I really enjoyed the first one, and I liked the second one too, but not as much. And I still think the first is the best of the three, followed by this one, with the second one being the worst. It's still good, but not as good as the other two, in my opinion. Everything makes sense. There's a major reveal in this book that is entirely justified and is really well built up and makes sense given what breadcrumbs you're given throughout the series. And it was just very excellently done. And it was great writing, even if the reveal itself was a horrible, terrible thing. I think this book does a really good job of keeping the characters true to themselves while still giving them room to grow. The Elle in this book is very different from the Elle in A Deadly Education, but her growth makes sense with her character, and we got to see that growth, so it was like a nice culmination of all of that. As an added bonus, this book is very female-centric. All of the main focus characters are women. I don't think there's any non-binary characters in this who are just femme. No, I'm pretty sure they're all women. There's a handful of male characters, but they're more side characters, or we don't see them as much. So it's nice to have a female-led series. That's nice. I think the ending is actually incredibly satisfying and everything that I really could have asked for with this series. Everything, lined up, and every decision was very in character, even if I didn't agree with it personally. I could see why they were making this decision. As for what I didn't like so much, where are the pretty gloves, Leia? It'll be a great idea, Leia. You never get a chance to wear them, Leia. Turns out I can't use the trackpad on my laptop while wearing them, despite them being lace and 90% skin. Anyway, so what I didn't like so much in this book is that there is a lot of filler. Elle's thoughts have a tendency to spiral and just keep going, so we'll get paragraphs of her thoughts, which I find her thoughts are interesting, but they're also very long. And this is something that's been happening since the first book, but I do think it's most prevalent in this one. And some of her thoughts, maybe a lot of her thoughts, tend to get very repetitive, especially when she's thinking about Orion, or when she's talking about Orion. She tends to kind of go in circles and bring up a lot of the same points. And the other thing is that I really wish we'd seen some of the other characters that were more prevalent in the first two books. Adia and Mew are still here. We do get to see them, but we got to know them so well in the first two books that I would have liked to see a little more of them. I like them. So yeah, overall, I quite enjoyed it, despite its couple of flaws, and I'd still recommend the series. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I read Shudder by Ramona Emerson, which is an adult paranormal mystery thriller. So this follows Rita, who is a Navajo woman working as a forensic photographer for the Albuquerque police force. Rita is incredibly good at capturing details in her photographs, and that's because Rita's secret is that she can see ghosts. This becomes a bit of a problem for her when a ghost of a recent victim whose death was deemed a suicide latches onto Rita, claiming that it was in fact a murder. She forces Rita into a revenge quest of sorts against the ones who murdered her, dragging Rita into very dangerous territory that she may or may not survive. First of all, I think this book probably should have come with a content warning. The protagonist is a crime scene photographer, and we do see her go on a lot of her jobs, which involve photographing victims of crimes and their wounds, and these are often described in very minute detail. It can get quite graphic at times with the descriptions of the wounds. And like how they were made. So if you're sensitive to blood or violence, you might not be able to get through this, especially because one of the victims that Rita photographs is an infant. Now, if you can handle that, I think this is a pretty solid murder mystery. I didn't love it personally, but I thought it was fine, and I would recommend it to murder mystery fans. Or like specifically like thriller mystery fans. There was a nice juxtaposition between the like borderline horrific repetitiveness of Rita's work with the crime scenes versus what it was like for her growing up on a reservation with her grandmother. I think the two blended together really nicely without anything being jarring, and the flashbacks were quite interesting. The thing that bothered me most was that it kind of felt like Rita was, and I don't really like to use this word, it kind of felt like she was being a bit of a doormat to the ghosts, especially this one, that the main one that's haunting her, that's causing all these problems. The message at the end is something like, you help people because they need it, not because they're gonna do something for you. Which is great and very noble, and, you know, I do believe that. But I also don't think you're obligated to help somebody who is actively abusing you and ruining your life, whether they're dead or not. So while I get that the circumstances were a bit unusual, considering, you know, there's a ghost involved, it still felt like a very strange message to send. Like, I don't think you're obligated to help anybody if they're actively harming you, is my take. Maybe I'm missing something. So anyway, I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Next up, I read The Art of Prophecy by Wesley Chu, which is an adult epic fantasy. So in this world, there are 2 main cultures. There's the Jun and the Katouh. I think I'm pronouncing this correctly. And within the Jun's major religion, which is called the Tiandi, there is a prophecy that states that a child will rise to defeat the eternal Khan, or the god king of the Katouh, and save the kingdom. The child has been found already. He's a boy named Jian, who has spent his life in a gilded palace with his every need tended to. Only the prophecy was wrong, and now the entire kingdom has to deal with the fallout of their faith having been proved false. This is a good one. This is everything you want in an epic fantasy. The scope is there, the stakes are there, the characters are there, the world building and magic are there. But then on top of that, there's this incredible dissection of religion. Like, what do you do when the religion that has guided your whole kingdom for centuries is seemingly proven false? That's a fascinating question. This world is so rich, and the fight sequences are top tier. I sometimes get bored with fight scenes in books, to be honest. I just kind of like mindlessly like glaze through them. But these ones were so unique and creative, and that very easily kept my attention. And all without being gratuitously violent either, which was nice. I don't mind violence in books, but like, I don't need it there. And I'd kind of rather it wasn't, you know, super heavily detailed violence. Like, it's fine if it's there, but I'd rather not be. The characters are also incredible. Ling Taishi is my favorite. She's this elderly war arts master who absolutely still kicks ass and can also ride wind currents. And I just kept picturing her as an older Michelle Yao, because I also think Michelle Yao kicks ass. I love her. And she just won like a Golden Globe or something. Wow. I don't keep touch with awards, so I don't actually know if it was a Golden Globe, but she just won an award, and it's so well deserved. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, the book. So the few nitpicks I have are that Jian's competency level kind of seems to fluctuate. At times, he would give a very senior fighter a run for his money. Wouldn't beat him, but would, give him a fair fight. But then other times he would struggle against common soldiers. So, which is it? So, yeah, I think that could have been a little bit better established. And one of the characters, whose name is Chisami, she's a great character. She's very interesting. She feels less three-dimensional than the other ones, but probably because she only arrives, like, halfway into the book. But she's like a borderline sociopathic assassin and murderer who delights in violence. And she's the only LGBTQ plus representation. So yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. It seems like a choice. But hopefully in the sequel, she will get a little bit more developed and more well-rounded, and maybe she won't be the only LGBTQ plus representation. But yeah, those are my two nitpicks, and other than that, I am really looking forward to the sequel whenever it comes out. I give it 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I read As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow by Zoulfa Katouh, which is a YA contemporary. We follow Salama, who is, I can't remember if she's 18 or 19, but one of those. She was a pharmacy student when revolution broke out in Syria. Now she spends her days volunteering at the hospital in her hometown as one of the few remaining doctors. So even though she had no experience as a doctor, wasn't even studying to be a doctor, she was the closest thing they had, so she got a promotion because they had nobody else. She is currently struggling between staying and helping those who need her, or fleeing the country to save herself and her pregnant sister-in-law, Layla. Torn between her loyalty to her country and her conviction to survive, Salama's decision is further complicated when her paths cross with someone that she was supposed to meet before the war started. I am not exaggerating when I say that everyone needs to read this book. Everyone. This is a book that should be read in schools. This is a book that hurts and is brutal and is necessary, but also manages to remain hopeful too. Salama's fear has reached this point where her PTSD has manifested as this hallucination of a man called Koff, I believe is how you pronounce it, I could be wrong, who constantly tries to get her to leave by showing her all the horrific possibilities of what could happen if she stays. But she struggles with this notion of, if everyone leaves, does that mean the oppressors win? And she's one of the only doctors left at her hospital, so what will happen to the patients if she leaves? But woven through all that pain and uncertainty is this really beautiful love story that is very reminiscent of a Jane Austen romance, because both of them are devout Muslims, so there's no physical intimacy. The author refers to it as a halal romance, which I think is very cute. So yeah, this just feels like a really necessary story, and it also made me realize like my own shortcomings of like just how little I knew about what was going on in Syria. And yeah, it made me research what was going on and learn more about it. And I think more people should do that. So yeah, it's just necessary is very much how I would describe this book. Necessary and hopeful. So yeah, I think I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. And so this is only for if you've read it. I have some spoilers. So if you don't want any spoilers, skip ahead to the next book that I'm going to talk about. These are only mild spoilers. I'm not going to go crazy, but I don't want you to watch this part if you haven't read the book yet. Okay? You got 5 seconds to leave. Okay, you better be gone now. So I found this book on an Instagram reel that was of books with amazing twists, and it was on the list with Iron Widow, which is a book that I love, and that had an excellent twist. So I picked this book up knowing that there was a major twist, so I kind of guessed what it was immediately, which was unfortunate, and it by no means, ruined the story for me. I still loved this story. I just think the twist would have hit a lot harder if I hadn't guessed it from literal, page 10. And I think it would have been more shocking if I hadn't known that there was going to be a twist. So, kind of unfortunate, but just something I wanted to mention. Moving on. After reading As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow, I needed something light and cute, so I reread Le Petit Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, which is a classic children's fantasy fiction. It is about a pilot who is stranded in the desert, and he wakes up one day to find a strange boy who asks the pilot to draw him a sheep. As the little prince shares his story, the two ponder what the most important things in life really are. I haven't read this book since I was 13, and I'm so glad I reread it because it's just as cute as I remember it being. It's sort of a reflection on how we grow up and become adults, and how we sort of lose focus on what really matters, on what's really important. On his way to Earth, the little prince stops by a bunch of different planets and meets a bunch of different people, and each person that he meets is a different kind of adult. So he meets someone who, expects to be obeyed and is all about obedience and thinks he's the ruler of everything. And then he meets somebody who is really obsessed with business, and he meets someone who's obsessed with doing their job, whether or not it matters. He also meets a drunk. And a bunch of other kinds of adults, each with their own little tics. So it's very cute and charming. And the little fox who wants to be tamed, he gets me every time. And then the way this philosophy comes back around at the end between the pilot and the little prince, it's very cute. I give it 4 out of 5 stars. Next up, I read Lore Olympus by Rachel Smith. Correct, by Rachel Smith, which is an adult graphic novel. It is a contemporary reimagining of the Persephone and Hades myth. So I had seen cosplayers cosplay as Hades and Persephone for ages, and I knew they were Hades and Persephone, but I didn't know what they were from. And then I finally started hearing about Lore Olympus, but I didn't know what it was. I thought it was an anime for a long time, but nope. Apparently it was a webcomic, and now it's a graphic novel. I wasn't even supposed to read this, but one of my partner's friends lent it to him, but since I'm a faster reader than he is, I read it first, and that ended up being a good call because I finished it in about 20 minutes. So first of all, artwork, stunning. I love the colors in this. They're so beautiful and they play so well against each other. I also really enjoyed the story. This more modern take on the Greek pantheon is really interesting, and I'm very intrigued to see more. I also love the Hades and Persephone myth because it's one of the few Greek tragedies that does leave some space for female agency if you so choose to interpret it that way. And I really like it when people take that myth and turn it into a very genuine love story. Unfortunately, there was something that kept me from enjoying this completely. So there is a content warning at the beginning of this. which I really appreciate. And it is a content warning. It says that this book contains depictions of unhealthy relationships and sexual assault. So I wasn't unprepared for a sexual assault scene, but unfortunately it happens very close to the end, and there's no resolution for it. The book ends very shortly afterwards, and we don't see the character who went through that again. That's the last we see of her in volume 1. So you have this horrific scene that ends, and then you have some other characters kind of going about their day, and then it ends. So I was just left in this very uncomfortable, unsafe feeling. I didn't feel okay for several hours after I finished this. And if I'd had the second volume on hand, then it would have been fine, because I could have read that until it got to a point where I felt more okay. But I didn't. I didn't have it. So I didn't have it. And because SA scenes are, for me as a reader, I'm a little bit more sensitive to them, I was just kind of left to stew in this really uncomfortable feeling. So if SA is something that you are more sensitive to, I would strongly recommend either having both volumes on hand before you start reading, or you could read the web comics, which flow a little bit better from what I've been told. But yeah, definitely if that's something that is on your radar as a something that you're sensitive to, and you really want to read the book version specifically, just get both of them at the same time and just keep reading. Because I do recommend this book. It is very good. And I don't even think that, that the SA scene was poorly done or anything, or irresponsibly done. It's just that the book ends so soon afterwards that it was very jarring. But if you get the second one, you'll probably be fine. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. And the last book that I read in December was another reread. It was Shadow Horse by Alison Hart, which is a YA middle grade mystery. This is about a 13-year-old girl named Jazz, who has just been found guilty of assaulting Hugh Robichaud, who is the owner of the horse farm where she and her grandfather both lived and worked. The reason she assaulted him is because Jazz is convinced that Hugh killed Jazz's favorite mare, Whirlwind. But with no proof, Jazz is sent to live at an animal rescue farm while under probation. While there, she rescues a scrawny, listless horse named Shadow, who Jazz thinks may be the key to uncovering the mystery of why Hugh killed one of his own horses. So I read this back when I was like 10 or 11, and I happened to remember it a couple months ago, but the only thing I remembered about it was that I finished it in 2 hours flat, and I really liked it. That's all. So I decided to revisit it and say whatever mean horse girl derogatory things you want. I actually still enjoyed it. The writing is definitely clumsier than I remember it being. Definitely gave me some, this was written for children vibes. But other than that, the story and the mystery are well established and quite interesting. There's also this really great subplot of Jazz learning that horses and all animals are valuable in and of themselves, and they don't need to do anything for you in order, or win anything in order to have worth, which is a big hot topic in the horse community because, oh boy, some high-level equestrians are really out here treating their horses like equipment, and it's not cool. So yeah, apart from some clunky writing and some bits at the end that weren't wrapped up, it just kind of ended, I think it's a pretty solid book, and the things that weren't super wrapped up are probably going to be in the sequel that I only found out about 17 years later. So I guess I'll have to read the sequel now. So yeah, I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. And those were all the books that I read in December. Thank you so much for watching. If I had to pick a favorite, probably As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow, surely followed by the War Art saga. Oh my gosh, what was it called? The Art of Prophecy, right? Yeah. And least favorite would definitely be Shudder. So yeah, if you read any of these books, let me know what you thought down in the comments. Would love to hear about it. If you'd like to see me elsewhere, you can find me on Instagram as Leia Like the Princess, where you can also find my little embroidery and art store, Moonlit Cat Creations, or you can go directly to my website at moonlitcatcreations.com. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, stay cozy.